Today's daf is Menachos daf Kufhei. And we are Be'ezus Hashem holding the beginning of a new parak, the 13th and last parak of Maseches Menachos, parak Harei Olai Isaroin, in the middle of daf Kuf Daled Amid Beis. Today's daf is being learned Le'ilu Nishmas Gittel Bas Reb Ephraim Tzvi Halevi. Zok the Mishnah. Harei Olai Isaroin. If somebody says that I'm taking upon myself a neder to bring an Isaroin to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a mincha, Yavi Echad. The halacha is he has an obligation to bring one Isaroin as a mincha. In other words, we know a person can bring a minchas nedava. Mincha is one of those karbanis that could be brought either b'chayva or b'nedava. If somebody is mikabel b'nedav and nedava to bring a karban mincha, his lashon was harei ilai isaroin. It's a lashon yachid, hence he has to bring one isaroin, he has to bring one mincha. Esroinos, what would be if somebody says harei ilai esroinos? Yavi shnayim, he brings two. Esroinos is already a lashon rabbin. Miet Rabbi Mishnayim, tafasta mu'et tafasta, like the Gemara always says. So for that reason, this person will have an obligation to bring two menachos, each one consisting of an isarin. Pirashti, in the event that a person says that I was mefarish, that I was going to bring a certain amount of Esroinos. I can't remember what exactly I said. Yavi Shisha Misarin. The halacha is he has to bring 60. The reason is because the maximum shear that a mincha could be is 60 Esroinos. Being that he doesn't know what he was obligated to bring, misafik, he has to bring the max, and therefore the halacha is he brings 60 esroinas. You can't have a mincha of more than 60. As a result, more than 60 you don't have to worry about. Harei mincha. What would be if somebody says I'm going to bring a mincha, but he wasn't the farish which type of minchas nedava he wants to bring? Yavi eze sheyertze, he could bring anyone that he wants. Rabbi Yehuda says Yavi minchas hasoiles. He has to bring dafka the minchas hasoiles shehi miyuchad shebe menachos. It's the most miyuchad of all the menachos. The Gemara very much is going to explain what this means. So we know just from reading the psukim in the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, the Torah says there's 5 different types of minchas nedavas that one can bring. Minchas soilis, minchas machvas, minchas marcheshes, and then there's the minchas mafetanu that can come either in the form of chalis or in the form of rikikin. So if somebody says harei olai mincha, it can be any one of those 5. Stating that, Rabbi Yehuda says no. Harei olai mincha bistama, he brings a mincha sasoilis. Mincha, what would be if somebody says harei olai mincha oi, or he said harei olai min ha-mincha? Yavi yachas, you bring one. Menachos, if somebody would say harei olai menachos, oi min menachos, or he would say harei olai min menachos, yavi shtayim, because menachos is already a lashon rab. If somebody says pirashti ve'eni yodeya eze mehem pirashti, if somebody says that I was mefarish which mincha to bring, but I can't remember which one it was, Yavi Chameshton, in that case, he has to bring all 5. Now, this is different than the previous case where he said, Harei olai mincha, period. Those were his words. There, you could bring anyone you want. Rabbi Yehuda has a chiddush, you have to bring the minchas hasoilas. Over here, the person specified something. We just don't know what he specified. So here, everybody agrees that could be you said the minchas hasoilas, could be you said the machvas, the marcheshes, could be you said the mafitan of chalas or rikikin. Being that there's for sure 5 possibilities, misafik, you would have to bring all 5. Pirashti, if somebody says, I was mefarish mincha shal esroin, that I was going to bring a mincha made up of esroinim, but I can't remember how many esroinim I said I was going to bring. Yavi shisha misarein, you bring 60, because again, that's the maximum share that you should have to bring. Rabbi says, Yavi menachos shel esroinos me'echad vad shisha. Rabbi has a chiddush. Rabbi says, this person's going to have to bring 60 menachos. Wow. 60 menachos, and each mincha is going to be made up of a different share, 1 through 60. So you're going to bring a mincha made up of 1 isarin, a mincha made up of 2, a mincha made up of 3, a mincha made up of 4. Now notice, this case of pirashti mincha shel esroin ve'eni yodeya kama pirashti seems very similar to one of the earlier cases that we had, first line of the Mishnah, where the person said pirashti ve'eni yodeya ma pirashti. Over there was no machlokes. There the Mishnah said yavi shisha misarin. Over here, that's only one of 2 opinions. It's the opinion of the Tana Kama, yavi shisha misarin. But here there's also a shitas Rabbi that says you can't bring one mincha made up of shisha misarin, but rather you have to bring 60 menachos each one made up of a different amount of Esroinus ranging from 1 through 60. Why in the first case is there no machlokes? In the second case, there is a machlokes. Are they really the same case? And punkt, we didn't mention Rebbe in the first case, but we're mentioning Rebbe in the second case. Or are the cases really different? That is going to be a machlokes amayron in the Gemara. Either way, a lot of cases, super technical, that were discussed here in the Mishnah, and the Gemara now is going to do what it does. So, the first halacha of the Mishnah was, Harei olai isaroin yavi echad. If somebody says, Esroi nois, Yavi Shnayim. Says the Gemara, Harei Olai Isarin Pshita. It's so obvious. If he says Harei Olai Isarin, of course Yavi Echad. Why would you think not? It sounds like you have to bring one mincha made up of one Isarin. What else could you think? So the Gemara says, true, Esroin is Yavi Shnayim, it's Strichale. The Chiddush is not the first case, the Chiddush is the second case. But the Gemara says, Hanami Pshita. That's also Pashit. If you said Esroin Nois, so doesn't Esroin Nois mean two? So the Gemara says, yes, but it could also mean more than two. And really, there's a chiddush. The chiddush is that miat esroinos shtayim etzrichalei. That being that the minimum amount of loshen rabim is two, we teach that when you said esroinos, you meant two, v'lo yoser, not more. So it's true. It's pshita that esroinos doesn't mean one, but it's not pshita that esroinos doesn't mean three. So, Harei Olai Isaroin is pshita that it means one, not less than one and not more than one. And that's only mentioned b'derech agav. B'derech agav to what? To build up to Harei Olai Esroi Nois. Isn't that pshita? Half of it is pshita. It's pshita that Esroi Nois is not one. It's not pshita that it's not three. And being that Harei Olai Esroi Nois means two and not more than two, that already is a chiddush, and that's why it was mentioned. The next case was Peirashti ve'eni yedea ma Peirashti. So the person said that I was mefarish how many Esroi Nois I'm going to bring. But I wasn't mefarish how many. I was mefarish, but I just can't remember how many I was mefarish. So the Mishnah says, Yavi Shisha Yisar. You should bring 60 Yisar. Now, as introduction to these next lines of Gemara, let's just chazer over the last case that we made a little bit of a deal of when we learned the Mishnah. The last case of the Mishnah was eerily similar. Pirashti mincha shal esrainim. I was mefarish, I'm going to bring a mincha shal esrainim. Ve'ini yedea kame pirashti. Almost the same case. Yavi shishim isaron, you bring 60 isaron. Rabbi said, Yavi menachos shall isroinos me'achavad shishim. That no, the halacha is that you bring not one mincha made up of 60, but 60 menachos, each one ranging from 1 to 60. Now, we said that at first glance, the cases sound the same. Truth is, let's do the work by ourselves for a second. Let's look at the language very, very carefully. Is it mamish the same? Right, it's fun sometimes to roll up the sleeves to zamen. So if you look at the first case, Peirashti, ve'eni yedea ma Peirashti. Yavi shisha misar. Right, it's referring to the beginning of the Mishnah. Harei olai, isaroin, azoi. Esroinois, azoi. Harei olai, I said something, but I don't remember what exactly it was. Yavi shisha misar. In the last case of the Mishnah, it's pirashti mincha shel esroinim, ve'eni yedea kame pirashti. What's the nuance? What's the subtle difference? He said over here, mincha shel esroinim. He didn't just say Harei Olai Isaroin or Esroinim. Harei Olai Mincha Shel Esroinim. That word Mincha was not mentioned in the first line of the Mishnah. It's very much mentioned over here. That's where there's a little bit of a Pesach to maybe hear that maybe there's a chiluk between the two cases. But either way, let's see what the Gemara does about this. So again, Pirashti, they need ma Pirashti. So the Mishnah mentioned only one Shita, and that is Yavi Shisha Misar. Zok the Gemara Mantana, who's the Tana? Amar Chizkiya. Chizkiya said, like Rebbe, it's not like Rebbe in the Seif of the Mishnah, the Rebbe, because if this part of the Mishnah Kitchtem, even with Rebbe, Amar Rebbe said, Yavi Menachos, Shalas Roinos Me'achavad Shishim. Rebbe said that in the event that the person said Pirashti Mincha Shal Esroin Ve'enu Yedea Kami Pirashti, you have to bring 60 different menachos. So even though Rebbe was not choylek in the Reisha of the Mishnah, but we know from the Seif of the Mishnah that for sure the Reisha is the like Rebbe. In other words, there's no chilik in halacha between the first case and the second case. Why are we mentioning it as two cases? Maybe the chilik is because here you said Mincha, you didn't say Mincha. Maybe there would have been a Havamina, Ben Benoishal Havamina, that should be a Nafkamina. But at the end of the day, there is no chilik, says Chizkiya, and just like Rebbe was choylek on the Tanakama, when the Tanakama said Yovi Shisha Misorin in the Sefer, Rebbe would be chaylik in the Reisha as well. Mishnah doesn't mention Rebbe. True, Masis and the Leiker Rebbe. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan was chaylik. He said, Afilu Tamer Rebbe. You could say La'olam that the first case of the Mishnah is going according to Rebbe, and that's why Rebbe is not chaylik in the first case. He's chaylik in the Sefer. He's not chaylik in the Reisha because he agrees with the Reisha. What's the difference? The difference is the chiluk is that, like we mentioned, in the Reisha he didn't mention the word mincha. In the Sefer he mentioned the word mincha. You know what the difference is? Mincha is a singular lashon. If a person said that I am going to bring a mincha shel esroinim, that means the entire mincha has to be brought in one keli. If, however, the person just says harei olai esroinos, then you can bring it in multiple kalim, if that's what you choose to do. When you will mechayev yourself to bring it in one keli, then Rebbe holds the maisi shita in Esrai's b'shita money. That's when he has his shita, that the only way to fulfill this suffix over here is by bringing 60 different menachos. In the case where you will never mechayev yourself to bring it in one keli, over there you don't have shitas Rebbe, and that's why in the Reisha, Rebbe is going to be made. In other words, the chiluk between the Reisha and the Sefer is the mincha. What does that word mincha do? It's koveya that it has to be in one keli. So in the event that you say the word mincha, it has to be in one keli, that's where Rebbe's shita is going to go into effect. In the Reisha, where you didn't say that it has to be in one keli, over there it's not going to go into effect. So let's just explain this a drop better. What is the machloikis between Rebbe and the Chachamim in the last case of the Mishnah? Pirashti mincha shal esroin ve'eni yadei kame pirashti. According to the Chachamim, Yovi Shisha Misarin, you could bring 60 esroinas. You have to bring 60 Yisroinis, and you can be Yoitza with just bringing 60 Yisroinis. Bring it all in one keli. Rebbe says, Yovi Menachos al Yisroinis, mi echadat shisha. Now you have to bring 60 different Menachos. Both Rebbe and the Chachamim agree that in this case, there's a suffix. Did you mean 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 60? So the Chachamim say, bring 60, and like this, you're going to be Yoitza. Why are you going to be Yoitza? Because if you're his chayvus, your neder was to bring 60, you brought your 60. Let's say your chayvus was to bring 30. Okay, so you have 30, b'chlal the 60. Are you bringing an extra 30? Okay, so that will be B'Torah's neder v'nedava now, but at the very least you'll be able to fulfill your original neder v'nedava that you had made to bring 30. Rebbe holds that the halach is that you're not allowed to be moisif on a mincha. So if I was mechayev myself to bring a certain amount, so I have no ability, I'm not allowed to be moisif, and being that I'm not allowed to be moisif, so it's for that reason, if I was mechayev myself to bring 30, well at this point, it has to be that 30, and if I'm going to be moisif on that 30, at that point, it's already not going to be okay. So that's why Rebbe holds that on the tzad, that you said 60, yeah, you bring one mincha of 60, it's going to be good. But what if you said 30? Or what if you said 20? Or what if you said 27 or 32? So it's for that reason, for each one of these menachos, you're going to have to go ahead, and you're going to have to bring a separate mincha. But that Rebbe holds is only an issue to the extent that you said that you want the entire mincha to be brought with one keli. When you said that you want the whole mincha to be brought with one keli, so then there's a kpeda that it has to be like pachas for yoser. And as a result, now you are mechayev myself. This mincha is going to be perfect, it's going to be exact. You have to make sure you're going to get it right. If, however, you never were mechayev yourself to bring it in one keli, you were not kavatim bekli, so then Rebbe's moida that as long as you have the amount that you need, that in of itself is going to be okay. Therefore, if you bring one mincha shal shisha misrainim, it's going to be good. Moving along. The Mishnah said, Harei olai mincha. If a person says Harei olai mincha, and he wasn't mefarish which mincha he wants to bring. So, the Tanakama, the Chachamim say, Yavi ezer sheyertz. You can bring any mincha that you want. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yavi mincha sasoiles. You have to bring dafka the mincha sasoiles. Shehi miyuchedesh eve menachos. It's the most miyuchad of all the menachos, and that's the one that you're going to be obligated to bring. So at first glance, and at second glance, there's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. If somebody says a re'elai mincha, what you do? According to Chachamim, you can pick from the menu, 5. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to bring the minchas hasaylas. Additionally, Rabbi Yehuda gave his explanation. He said, why Minchas HaSoilas? Because it's the Miyuchad Sheba Menachos. It sounds like this is like the Spitz Mincha, stating that. So the Gemara Tana, we learned in a Braisa, Rabbi Yehuda said that you want to know why the Minchas HaSoilas, Hayulu Pasach B'Yakos of Tchil. Because if you open Parshas Vayikra, Perek Beis, V'nefesh Kisakriv Mincha, the first of the 5 that I mentioned is the Minchas HaSoilas. I mean that's the one that was mentioned first, that's the one that has Kedima. Freit the Gemara Akasha. And this next Gemara that we're going to learn is going to be the topic of the raid. If somebody says a Arei Yoilo, Yovi Ben Bakar, he should have a chiv to bring a Ben Bakar. So if somebody would say Arei Yoilo Stam, he should have to do Ben Bakar. You know, because if you look in the psukim that talk about the carbon oila, so it says a person can bring an oila, im oila karbanoi min habakar, right? Vayikra Perek Aleph Pasuk Gimel. That's the first one that's mentioned. So if you're telling me there's an Indian of Haylo Pasuk by Akas of Tchila, then that should be the halacha. Albeit it should be the halacha in the world of Rabbi Yehuda. Additionally, if somebody says Min Hatzayin, if somebody says Arei Oila Min Hatzayin, so we know the word Tzayin can be either Kvasim or Izin. Yavi Keves. You should have to bring the Keves. Haylo Pasuk by Akas of Tchila. Because when the Torah says Im Min Hatzayin, first it mentions the Keves, and then it mentions in the event that you're going to bring it from a goat. Or Min Ha'if. If somebody would say we know an oif could be either Tayrim or Bnei Yaina, but it should have to be Tayrim. Okay, we know it's not with it. Why we learn in the Mishnah Daf Kuf Zayin coming up in 2 days? If somebody says you bring a keves, and there's no shittas Rabbi Yehuda over there. Now, why it is if somebody says and why Rabbi Lozman Azariah says Torah ben Yoina, that's limudim. The Gemara is going to discuss it. But you know what? You're not going to find in that sugya, if you ayin sham, you're not going to find a mention of Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. L'chura, if the whole yesod of why Rabbi Yehuda holds Arei Olai Mincha, you bring the Minchas HaSoilas. Why? Hayul upasach by Akas of Tchila. Well, you have the Hayul upasach by Akas of Tchila by the Oila, and yet you don't find Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, Elam, you have to say that when Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah, we'll get back to the Bryce in a minute. But when Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that Yovi Minchas HaSoiles Shehi Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos, and he said that the reason is Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos, what's this Inyan? It's not Hoylo Pasal by a Kas of Tchil like he said in the Bryce, so it means something else. What it means is the Lesle Shem Levai. This is the only one of the Menachos that the Torah just refers to as is. Meaning, if you look in the Pasuk just describes the Nefesh Kisakriv Mincha, you should go ahead and you should bring the Minchas HaSoilas. When the Torah talks about the other Menachos, it says, in Minchas Machavas, in Minchas Marcheshes. Here it says, V'nefesh Kisakriv Mincha, there's an Indian to bring a Soilas. All the other ones sound like that when you were Mevata and you took upon yourself to go ahead and bring that Mincha, you said Minchas Machavas, you said Minchas Marcheshes, you said Minchas Ma'afeitaner. This is the only one where the Torah says, V'nefesh Kisakriv Mincha without a Shem Levai. Right? A Shem Levai is a surname, like a last name, an attached name. Comes up in different sugyas. This is the only place where you don't find the Shem Levai. Hence, if this person said Arei Olai Mincha without the Shem Levai, we assume that what he means is the Minchas HaSoilas. But the Gemara says it's a very nice taich in the Mishnah. The problem is V'hatana Hoylu Pasal by Akas of Tchila. That's not what the Brisa said. The Brisa said that Pshana Rabbi Yehuda is Hoylu Pasal by Akas of Tchila. So the Gemara says Hachi Kamer. This is how you have to read the Brisa. Izeu Mincha Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos L'Asel Shem Levai. Again, Rabbi Yehuda's reason is Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos. And what's the taich? What does it mean? Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos? It's L'Asel Shem Levai. What the Brisa was being moisef was, the Brisa was saying that which is the Miyuchadesh Shebe Menachos that has no Shem Levai? Zu Shepasach by Akas of Tchila. It's the first Mincha mentioned in the Parsha, which, oh, by the way, is the Minchas HaSoilas. But the Gemara says, Pshita, Minchas HaSoilas Kamer. What are we being moisef over here? Rabbi Yehuda said, Yovi Minchas HaSoilas, Shi Miyuchadesh Shebe Menachos. You want to know which is the Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos? It's the one that has no Shem Levai. Yep, you want to know which one has no Shem Levai? It's the first one. You look up the Chumash, which is the first one? It's the Minchas HaSoilas. He said Minchas HaSoilas. Explain this a little bit better, right? Restating the obvious. Bishloima, if Rabbi Yehuda would have said, Yovi Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos. So then, Rabbi Yehuda never said what it is. He said Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos. So what's the Miyuchedesh Shebe Menachos? It's the one that has no Shem Levai. Which is the one that has no Shem Levai? So you have to mish up and you have to find out which one it is. So good, so the Brisa is helping you out a little bit, and he's telling you it's the Mincha that was Pasach by Akas of Tchil. But it says Mefurish in Rabbi Yehuda's words, it's the Minchas HaSoilas. So there's nothing to look up. We're just doing some academic exercise trying to figure out which is the mincha that's the Miyuchada Sheba Menachos, or why it's called the Miyuchada Sheba Menachos. But which one it is we know, because it's mefurish in the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, I don't understand, why would the Tana have to tell me Hoylu Pasa by a Kas of Tchila? It has almost no Havana. Says the Gemara, Simana Ba'alma. It's true. The Tana was not coming to be mechadish anything. You know what the Tana was coming to do? He was coming to give us a mnemonic. He was coming to give us a good way to remember. Because there's 5 menachos, and let's be honest, menachos can be ganz verplanted. So a person's going to say, mincha, I know it's the Miyuchada Sheba Menachos, can't remember which one it was. So he gave you a good way to remember. It's the first one. If you remember Minchas HaSoiles, you don't need Hoylu Pasa by Akas of Tchila. Right? Just like you don't need other simanim when it comes to if you're going to remember it. But it's a good memory aid. It's a good way to remember. By the way, who's the one that's giving us the simon over here? It's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, you're noisim them simonim. The tzachadash b'achat, right? So if you know dam tzvadei akinamaroi, then you know the abarbanel, you know all the raid. So you don't need the tzachadash b'achat. But if you don't, you need it. See, it's true. If you remember minchas hasoilis, I don't need oilu pasa by akas of tchila. But Rabbi Yehuda l'shi tasai, who's noisim behen simonim, he says, I'll give you a simon. Good way to remember it is Hoyu upasach by akas of tchila. It's interesting, by the way. Just hit me literally as we're speaking right now. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir are Balei Plukta, right? We've spoken recently and many times over the years about Rabbi Meir's photographic memory. So Rabbi Meir doesn't have to give simanim. Rabbi Meir has no shikha. It's a nechel l'noichach yabitu v'afapecha yashiru l'nagdecha. Right? Rabbi Meir sees klar of Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe didn't have that same zakaron like Rabbi Meir. So whereas Rabbi Meir is mamish photographic, Rabbi Yehuda's hayonoisa mehem simanim. But either way, al derech tzachas. Mincha, mincha v'chulu. So the next lines of the Mishnah were, if a person says mincha, oy minha mincha, yavi achas. Right? So if somebody says harei alai mincha, it's a lashon yachid, ein mincha. If a person says harei alai minha mincha, it's a lashon yachid, you bring one. If a person says harei alai menachos, it's lashon rab, and you bring 2. If a person says harei alai min menachos, again you bring 2. What if he says peirashti v'eni yadea is mehem peirashti? Yavi Chamesh. So the Gemara is going to do what it does now. By the way, this sugya is very much when Menachos meets Nedarim, right? In Masechtas Nedarim, there's many blatter where the Gemara gets involved in the nuance of the language, right? There's a real Lashon B'nei Adam piece, Ayin B'Rishonim, that's playing itself out in this sugya. But either way, Min HaMincha V'chulu. But Rapapa cleared the following, Yibaya, Mine Mincha Mahu. What would be if somebody said, Harei Olai Mine Mincha? So again, very nuanced. Harei Olai Mincha, 1. Harei olai min hamincha, 1. Harei olai menachos, 2. Harei olai min menachos, 2. Right, let's focus on the second half of those 2 equations where he used the double lashon. Harei olai min hamincha, that's 1. Min menachos is 2. What are we discussing? Mine mincha. Now to be clear, min hamincha is 1. That's easy. That's singular. Min menachos is singular. That's min. Menachos is plural. So essentially the question of mine mincha is where one is singular, one is plural. But it's in the inverse case of from what we have in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah we have it where it's min menachos, that's 2. Rapapa Shaila was where it's mine mincha. Is that going to be 1 or is that going to be 2? Believe it or not, there's a nafkamina as we'll see, and this is what Rapapa wants to know. So what's Rapapa Shaila mine mincha? Kiva damar mine. Do we say being that he started off mine b'lashon rabim tartni kamar? He for sure meant 2. You my mincha. So why did he say mincha in the singular? The kula menachas nami mincha mikarin, because you find already in the psukim that sometimes we refer to all the menachas in the singular. The chsev v'zois teiras ha-mincha. You find so mincha. Right, we're learning Masechtas Menachos, not Masechtas Mincha. Why Menachos? Because it talks about different Menachos. But the truth is, it could have been called, in a way, Masechtas Mincha, because you find Taka that all the Menachos are sometimes referred to as a Mincha. But anyway, that's one side in Rapapa's Ibaya. That Mine Mincha is really Lashon Rabin, right? It's mistabed that this person's being consistent. He said Mine Mincha. He is such a Baki and Teresh B'Ksav. He knows that all the Menachos can sometimes be referred to as Mincha. And it's for that reason he used this very flowery lashon in the way he took upon himself this his chayvus, this menefesh kisakriv that he wants to bring to the Eibishter. But the bottom line is, minei mincha means plural. As a result, he'd be chayiv to bring to Oidom, or maybe no. Keep it on mincha chad. Mincha kamen. No, mincha means mincha. Umay minei mincha. What then did he mean minei mincha? Achikamer mi minei mincha chad mincha alai. That from the minei mincha, because there's many different types of menachos that a person can bring, and as a result, that's maybe what his chayvus was. The bottom line is, what did he mean when he said minei mincha? Did he mean two? I mincha is a lashon yachid. You find the Torah refers to all the menachos in the singular, or did he really mean one? Hence mincha in the singular. What then did he mean when he said minei mincha? He meant minei mincha. It's not minei mincha be mechayev too, but from the minei mincha be mechayev ein mincha and be mechayev on. So let's see if we can be purchased from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said mincha oy min mincha yavi achas. It sounds like dafke min mincha bring one. Ha minei mincha shnayim. It sounds like if we would say minei mincha we'd have to bring two, right? Pretty good, right? But the Gemara is like the ema seifa menachos min. Min menachos yavishtayim. If the person said a real menachos or min menachos, they bring two. What does it sound like? Mine mincha chada. It sounds like only min menachos. In that case, where al kapanim the menachos was b'lashon rabim. So you said menachos b'lashon rabim. That's for sure what you meant. But if you would say mine mincha, then we would teach it mine mincha, and you would only be chayav one. So the bottom line is, from the first case of the Mishnah, there's a mashmois one way. From the second case of the Mishnah, there's a mashmois another way. What's the Gemara always do when you have a situation like this? You can't be pushing anything. So the Gemara, okay, if we struck out with the Mishnah, so what's always the next move of the Gemara? Right? Every Gemara follows the same signal. We try being pushing from the Mishnah. You have no right from the Mishnah. Let's stop pulling out brises. Tashma, a brise. If somebody says min menachos alai, if somebody says I'm taking upon myself min menachos, so the halach is yavi shtei menachos. He has to bring two menachos, and both of these menachos have to be from the same min. Now, that was the case of the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah said if somebody says min menachos yavishtayim, the Bryce is adding one piece of information that the Mishnah didn't say. And that is that being that he said min menachos means that it's not enough to bring shtei menachos, that we knew from the Mishnah, but it has to be min echad. Abazok the Gemara, the bottom line is we have the diak over here. Hami minei mincha chada, right? From the Mishnah, we could have been medayik, because in the Mishnah you had conflicting diyukim, but the Brisa we don't have conflicting diyukim. So it sounds like from the Brisa that if a person would say min menachos, then yavishtei menachos min echad. But if you would say minei mincha chada, the Gemara says no, there's no raya, because Dilma, I could always tell you ha minei mincha maybe shtei menachos. Maybe minei mincha you also bring two, not one. The diak. It said min menachos you bring two. No, because here it didn't just say min menachos you bring two. There was an extra piece of information. Min menachos you bring two, and the two have to be min echad. Why? Because you said the word min. So it could be where you said mine mincha, being that mincha can mean menachos. That's one side of Rav Papa Zibaya. And over here you didn't say min menachos. Over here you said mine. So over here you'd bring shtei menachos and mi shtei minem. So it's true there is a diuk to be had. You can't debate the diuk. Right? In the Mishnah there was no diukim because there was a stira. But in the Brisa, you don't have the stira. So the Brisa is a diak to be had. But the Gemara's timing, it's not muchach that the diak is Rav Papa Zibaya. Because Loivam, I could tell you that even when you said mine mincha, you would bring two. So why did it only say min menachos you bring two? Because there's an afkamina in the twos. Min menachos you bring two from the same min, because you said the word min. Mine mincha you bring two from two minim because you said mine. Also, in the Mishnah, we couldn't make this cheshbon, right? I mean, the Gemara anyways knocked out the diak in the Mishnah. But in the Mishnah, you couldn't say that maybe min menachos you bring two mishnei minim, min echad, but mine mincha you bring two mishnei minim. Why not? Because the Mishnah never got involved in one min or two minim. So this wasn't even a cheshbon you were able to make in the Mishnah. But in the Brisa, where we get involved in exactly how you would bring the min menachos, so then you could say that even if you have a diak, but maybe the diak is not that over there you bring one, you bring two, but fakert over there, it's two from two different Mine, but the Gemara says, I hear what you're saying, it's a nice dichoy, but you have to go weit in the Brisa, because the Brisa says, min menachos alai. If somebody said min menachos alai, maybe shtei menachos min echad. That's the halacha we just said. What's the next part of the Brisa? Mine menachos alai. Here it's plural. If he said both lashon rabim, maybe shtei menachos mishtei minim. Here it's mefurish that when do you bring shtei menachos mishtei minim? When you say mine menachos. pretty implied. Ha mine mincha chada. It sounds like if you'd say mine mincha, then for sure you would only bring one. So it's true. From the Reisha, there was no diak. It's true. If you only learn half the Brisa, then you could be doichet. Go with the hemshech of the Brisa. The Brisa told me the two cases where I bring two. And when it's one min, when it's two minim. Min menachos, it's one min. Mine menachos, it's two minim. But mine mincha, it sounds like for sure is only going to be one. The Gemara says true. I can't be machish this diak. It's impossible. Can't. It's a mefurish diak. Okay, so should we be poishid Rapapa Shaila? Gemara says no. Because Dilma Hamani Reb Shimoni. Maybe the Tana of this Brisa is the Heilige Reb Shimon, the Amar who said mechza chalois umechza rekikin yavi. Reb Shimon has a shita that the minchas mafei Tana, which was able to be brought either chalois or rekikim, could have been brought also mechza chalois mechza rekikim. This is a shita Reb Shimon that we've seen several times throughout Masechtas Menachos. Says the Gemara, loit Reb Shimon, if somebody would say mine mincha, Rav Papa would not even have his shaila. Because you know how we would taich mine mincha? Umay mine mincha, we would taich mine mincha means mincha de ispa trei mini. It's one mincha that's made up of trei minim. The only time Rav Papa ever declared what you do with mine mincha was the Leiker Reb Shimon, where there's no such thing as bringing one mincha made up of two minim. So now I have a tarta desasri. I said mine, which is rabim. I said mincha, which is yachid. So did he mean rabim, zois teres ha-mincha? Or did he mean mi mine ha-mincha? But Rav Papa would have never posed this question. I'll leave it to Rav Shimon. I'll leave it to Rav Shimon would have been poshit that mine mincha means I'm going to bring one mincha that's made up of two minim. If that's the case, I have a brisa now where it's meduyik that mine mincha you would bring one, right? Because min menachos, that's when it's two, one min. Mine menachos, that's when it's two minim, implying for sure that mine mincha is just going to be one. I'll tell you that's true. Because that's going, I'll leave it to Reb Shimon. And I'll leave it to Reb Shimon, it's pashut, it's going to be one. Because I'll leave it to Reb Shimon, there's a pashut to mahalach of what you do with mine mincha. You bring the minchas machtei taner, and you bring it half chalas and half rikikin. But Rav Papa's shaila was, I'll leave it to Rabbanon. And I'll leave it to Rabbanon, if this brisa is Reb Shimon, I have no pshitas. Let's see it inside. Maybe shnei menachos v'shnei minim. Maybe you would bring shnei menachos v'shnei minim. The reason the brisa is muchach that where you said minei mincha you would bring one mincha, that's because you're bringing one mincha chatzi chalos chatzi rakikin. That for sure makes the most sense. That only works in Reb Shimon's world. It does work in Rabbanon's world. Now maybe the brisa is going according to Rabbanon. If that's the case, you do have a pshitas. But kol zen nichnas in Rav Papa's ibayit. This is what Rav Papa wanted to know. Hence, Rav Papa was not sure what the halach is going to be. So again, I think we delivered on the promise. Nidarim vibes, right? Mincha, min mincha, menachos, min menachos, mine mincha, right? Mine menachos. That was one of the hisafis that we had in the brisa. Nafkim mina between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim. Regardless, we go weiter. So the Mishnah had said, next line, in the event that a person said pirashti, so I know I was makabel to bring a certain type of mincha, I just can't remember which one. Yavi chameshnan. The halacha is, you have to bring all five. And again, that's different where a person said harei olai mincha. He clearly was never mefarish. The shaila is, what does harei olai mincha stam mean? But over here, the person said, I was mefarish, I just can't remember what I was mefarish. So here there's no machlek to be in the chachamim. Everybody agrees that yavi chameshnan, you would have to bring all five. What's the cheshbon of five? Because there's five menachos that are brought in a dava, and it's those five that you would have to bring. So the Gemara, man Tana, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah said the Leiker Reb Shimon. It's the Leiker Reb Shimon, the Reb Shimon. Because if it's going to Reb Shimon, keep it on mechzachal kikin yavi. But the Reb Shimon holds that a person can bring a minchas mafei tanur that's going to be made up half of chalois and half for kikin. Well then. Like Rabbi Yehuda, even if Reb Shimon holds like Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar who holds kol ha-menachos ba'os eser, that all the menachos were brought 10 chalas, and just to speak out the words that all the Rishonim had. What does it mean? Inami sav like Rabbi Yehuda. V'loi mi baya, if he holds like Rabbi Meir who held earlier in the Masech that the kol ha-menachos ba'os, not 10 chalas but 12 chalas, yid beis chalas, ikalis fuka ba'arba esrei menachos. In this case, where the person said pirashti, the inner day is man pirashti, you wouldn't be able to satisfy your obligation with 5, but you would need much more. Like Rabbi Yehuda 14, and light Loit Reb Meir, it would have to be even more than that. It would have to be 16. What's the cheshbon? The cheshbon is, Reb Shimon has a shita that the Minchas Mafetana was able to be brought mechza chalis and mechza rekikin. So again, if somebody wants to be mekabel Minchas Udav, according to the Chacham, you have 5 choices: the Minchas Soilis, the Machvas, the Marcheshes, and then you could do the Mafetana and the chalis version, or you could do it in the rekikin version. According to Reb Shimon, it could be mechza chalis, mechza rekikin. So usually you would think, so according to Reb Shimon, there's 6 options, not 5, but 6. So it's like Reb Shimon, which by the way, that would be fine. But that's a tois. The reason that's a tois is because when Reb Shimon says that the Minchas Mafitana could be mechza chalas, mechza rekikin, he doesn't mean shnai moichs and betalis yachloiku, literally. He doesn't mean that you split it 50-50. What he means is that you can do it in any combination that you want. Meaning you want it could be partially Chalois or partially rekikin, right? Chatzi shir asim and atayra. It doesn't mean you have to have the half a shir. It means a little bit of the shir. Mechza chalis, mechza rekikin doesn't mean literally that it has to be mechza. Okay, so what are the options? I mean, what are the ratios? So the Gemara says it depends on how many chalas there are. Rabbi Yehuda holds that every mincha was made up of 10 chalas. So the cheshbon is, in Reb Shimon's world, where you're bringing the mafetana and you're doing mechza chalas, mechza rekikin, so if you want, you could have one as chalas, let's say 9 rekikin, or 2 chalas, 8 rekikin, or 3 chalas, 7 rekikin. Bottom line is, how many options do you have? You have 9 options, right? If you do the math. Because you're going to have at least 1 azay and 1 azay. So it could be up to 1 azay and 9 azay. But the bottom line is, there's 9 different options. There's 9 different possibilities of what a person could be neither. If that's the case, according to Reb Shimon, if somebody says pirashti ve'enu yadeya izamei pirashti, so how many options do you have? You have the 5 original, plus you have the mechza chalas mechza rekikin. There's 9 possibilities, because it could be 1, 9, 2, 8, 3, 7, 4, 6, 5, 5, 6, 4, 7, 3, 8, 2, 9, 1. Do the math. You only need your fingers for this. So you're going to end up with 9 different options, and as a result, you're going to have 5 plus 9 is be 14. Now, Loit Remeir, who holds it was Yid Beis Chalas, so how many options do you have? You have 11 options. So it's going to be 5 plus 11. It's the same thing. You have to have at least one. Right, it can't be 16 and 0, because then it's either the Chalas or the Rekikin. So it's, right, 15 or... it's 11 or 9, but the bottom line is, it's not going to be 5. So Zokti Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah, who's the Tana of Inzir Mishnah? It's the like Reb Shimon, because according to Reb Shimon, you don't have 5 choices. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have 14 choices. Was it even according to Rabbi Yehuda? Let me by the Reb Meir, where it's even more than 14. How many would it be? It would actually be 16. The bottom line is, this is what Rabbi Yirmiyah said. Abaye was chaylik. Abaye said, I feel the Reb Shimon. Well, the Mishnah would be going even according to Reb Shimon. What do you mean? There's all these different options. The Mishnah said only 5. No, Shamina le Reb Shimon Amar Maisi Umasni. It's because Reb Shimon l'shitosoi this can work. Reb Shimon has a shita in Kachin that a person who has a suffix Kachim, he has to bring a carbon, but there's some sort of suffix, as we'll see now, examples of it. There's a concept a person can bring the carbon alatnai, and you can say, if I have to bring the carbon, it's a carbon, and if not, let it be an adava. Or if I have to bring this carbon, let it be this carbon. I have to bring that carbon, let it be that carbon. There's different examples of how this can spiel zechais. But the bottom line is, Reb Shimon has a shita that there's a concept that a person can bring alatnai. If that's the case, Zaktabaya, there's no reason you have to bring more than 5. Because you're going to bring the 10 chalois of chalois by the mafitana. You're going to bring the 10 of the rekikin. Now, you're not sure what the chayvus was, right? In the world of mafetana, could be it was 100% mafetana, could be it was 100% rekikin, or it could be it was mechza chalas, mechza rekikin, and in the world of Rabbi Yehuda, you have 9 different possibilities. No worries. You're going to bring 10 and 10 of each anyways. And you're going to make a tanai. Whatever my responsibility was, that should be b'teiras my eschayvis. So whatever now will be a nun adava that I'm putting on the mizbech. And like this, everything is going to be fine. Memel, you have nothing to worry about. That's how it's going to play itself out. Why did we assume? Why did Rabbi Yirmiyah say Masis like Reb Shimon? Because the Mishnah said that you bring just 5. What do you mean just bring 5? There's 14 possibilities. It's true there's 14 possibilities. But by bringing 5, you can satisfy all the possibilities. The Mincha Silas, you'll bring a Silas. The Machvas and the Marcheshes, you'll bring that. Now, The mafetaner, that's where you have all these different obligations or possibilities. It's no big deal. You bring a fartige chalois mafetaner, a fartige rekike mafetaner, and then you'll start throwing your thumbs. You'll start making different tanoim. If I have to bring a chalois mafetaner, boom. If I have to bring a rekike, boom. If I have to bring 7 of these or 3 of these, okay, so 7 of these, boom. The other 3 are nedava. 3 of these, boom. The other 7 are nedava. So, Alts is gewaldig. Sagt Abaye, there's no reason. Now you're going to tell me, you're going to bring a carbon like that? It's true. It's a chiddush. Aber Shamina leder Reb Shimon. Geschmack, by the way, this whole daf is Reb Shimon. Shamina leder Reb Shimon, the Amar, Maisi umasni. That there's a musik that a person can bring Allah tonight. I think that's the yisoid of Shitas Reb Shimon. It's l'shitosoi. This is very much going to work. Now, what is the background to this? Reb Shimon, the Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Now, this brisa is a little bit scary. It is. Not going to lie to you. The makar to it is a Tosefta Masechtas Nazir, Perik Vav Halacha Aleph. If you look at the Maseres Hashas, it's also Zvachim Ayin Vav, Nida Daf Ayin, Nazir Daf Samach, right? 3 of the not easiest Masechtas in Shas. The background to this is the infamous Nazir Mitzayra. We don't have to go into the whole background of the Nazir Mitzayra. We schwitzed over this, Baruch Hashem, when we learned Masechtas Nazir together. But we're talking about a person who was a Nazir. Hareini Nazir. This person is a fartige Nazir. He has a suffix now that he might be Tomei Tomas Meis. Additionally, he also has a suffix. He might be a Mitzayra, not just any Mitzayra, a Mitzayra Muchlet. But the bottom line is, he's for sure a Nazir, but he also might be Tomei Tomas Meis, which means he's a Nazir Tomei. He also might be Mitzayra Muchel, which means he's a Nazir Mitzayra. And the discussion is, how does this guy go about, becoming Ois Nazir, right? That's really what he's trying to do. Now, the first thing he needs to do is, he has to become Ois Nazir Tomei. He also has to become Ois Mitzayra, because he can't even go through the process of Nazirus T'Tahira while you're in a state of Tumah, Tumas Meis, or you're in a state of Tumas Mitzayr. So the first thing is he needs to get rid of those 2 things. The problem is not so simple to just get rid of your tzaras. Why? Because part of getting rid of your tzaras is Vigilach Kol Sairai. To the extent that you're not a Mitzayr and you're really a Nazir, and you're a Nazir Tahir, there's an Istiglachas, right? So everything is somewhat contradictory to itself. Hence, this becomes a very complicated machlokes. Either way, we just need to focus on one piece, and that is this guy dealt with all the tiglachases. The price of this says he has to count 30 days, 30 days. He ends up doing 4 tiglachases, 120 days. This is a whole sugya. What we're up to now is where he's bringing a carbon. Now, he's bringing the carbon to make himself ois mitzayra. One of the karbanas that the Mitzayra had to bring was an asham. The shaylas has he bring his asham. An asham is not brought b'neder b'nedavar, right? If you have to bring an asham, you can bring an asham. If you don't have to bring an asham, you can't bring an asham. This guy is going to have to bring an asham misafik, otherwise he'll never become ois nazatar. And again, we're trying to work it out for him. We're trying to give him an eitzah. So he's up to bringing the asham right now. The question is, how does he go about it? So again, he counted all the days he needs to count, ayin sham. He did all the tiglacha says that he needs to do, ayin sham. He's up to the point now where we can make this work. We just have to address one last piece, right? We have to close one more loop, and that is, he's going to bring the asham, but maybe he's not a Mitzayra. If he's not a Mitzayra, how's he going to bring the Asham? So Reb Shimon there's an Eitzah. L'machras mevi Hashamai, v'lugai imai. You bring the Asham and the lug. What's the lug? That's the lug shemen. That was part and parcel of the Tahira of the Mitzayra. V'omer, and he says like this, Im Mitzayra hu, if I'm a Mitzayra, or this is maybe the Kohen talking, because the Kohen's the one bringing the carbon. Maybe that's why it's Belushin hu, right? Im Mitzayra hu, zeu Hashamai, v'zeu lugai. This is his Asham and this is the lug. V'im lav, and if he's not a Mitzayra, then Asham zeh yehi shalmei nedava. Because the animal that was brought from an Asham could also be brought as a shlamim. So let this be, instead of an Asham, let it be a shalmei nedava. Now, for Asham, as it relates to this quote unquote Asham, I'm not sure it's an Asham. Ton shchita betzafen. It needs shchita betzafen because on the tzad it's an Asham. It's kachik et Asham shechitasim betzafen. Umatim b'hoinis. You have to take from the dam with the like shemen, and you have to do the matin b'hoinis like every mitzvah needs in order to get the higher. Usmicha v'nesach v'tuvas chazav v'shaik. It also requires smicha nesach v'tuvas chazav v'shaik. Because maybe it's a Shalmei Nedava. These are things that an Asham Mitzayra doesn't need, but a Shalmei Nedava needs. V'nechel l'zichrei kahuna. It's eaten only the Zechrei kahuna, like Kachik Adash, because maybe it's an Asham. L'yom v'layla, only for a day and a night, because maybe it's an Asham. And an Asham, Kachik Adashim, is only eaten l'yom v'layla, in contrast to a Shlamim, which is Shnei Yom v'layla achas. Either way, said Abaya, This is all Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon said, Lamachas maybe Hashamay v'luga yimay, and you can make this whole fancy time. So you see, Reb Shimon has no problem with that. Reb Shimon has no issue bringing a carbon where I don't know right now if this is an Asham or a Shlam. He says it's fine as long as you can check off all the Asham boxes and all the Shlamim boxes. So you'll do Smicha, Truvas Chazav Shaykh, you'll do the Shchita B'tzaf, and it'll only be Itel Zichar Kun L'Yayim V'Lai. Like this, everything is going to be okay. But Zokt Abaya, Reb Shimon L'Shitasa, he has no problem. Bring 10 Chalois of Mafitan of Chalois, 10 Chalois Mafitan of Rikikin, and you'll make all the time like this. Everything is going to be okay. But Abaya had to preempt one more thing. He said, "Yeah, I have to come Mafrik Mar B'Shchitas Kachim." Even though the Gemara in Shchitas Kachim, that's more popularly known as Mesechtes Vachim. See, even though in Shchitas Kachim and Mesechtes Vachim, the Gemara handled this Shchitas Reb Shimon, and the Gemara came out like this. Mafrik means the Gemara was Miyashev, right? The Gemara had a whole discussion in the world of Reb Shimon in light of this shita that is masni or maisi. And the Gemara came out that Emadam Reb Shimon, when the Reb Shimon says Alacha, maisni or masni, that's lichat chilo, in a lachat chilo, the way that's litkune gavra. That's if you're coming to help somebody. It's like this guy is going to be an aguna type of person for the rest of his life. He's going to be stuck. Imagine living your whole life. You're not sure if you're a nazir tameh, or mitzayr muchlit. Again, I'm not holding in all these halachas, but it doesn't sound like a convenient way to get around, right? Tell me a little bit more about yourself. Well, I'm a nazir tar. Might be also a nazir tameh. Could be I'm a mitzayr muchlit, right? Try to give this guy an aliyah. It's not going to be simple. So the bottom line is for that guy, litkune gavra, to get him out of his mess, that's when we allow it lichatchila, right? The Gemara said this mefurish. So if that's the case, but in any other situation where we're not bailing somebody out, the evid then it only works, but the evid not lechatchila. So the Gemara already established in Masechtas Vachim Zaktabai that this whole Reb Shimon works, but it only works Latkune Gavra. But if it's not Latkune Gavra, this is really not something that can work. Now, but the evid it's fine. But lechatchila, here we're subscribing this, we're telling the guy go ahead and do this. This is not something that's fine. But the Gemara says Abaya said that doesn't bother me. I know that Gemara in doesn't bother me because Hani Mili Gabi Shlama. There, the Gemara Taka said it, but the Gemara said it regarding Reb Shimon's case, where you're bringing an Asham that might also be a Shlamim. That he didn't like. You know why? The Kamemait Bachilasam, the Havalu Kacham Lebeis Absol. A Shlamim can be eaten for 2 days and a night. Asham can only be eaten for a day and a night. This Shlamim, like Reb Shimon said, will have to be eaten Liyah and Valayla, because maybe it's an Asham. Which means that after a day and a night, in the event that there was noisa, there was something left over, no one's going to be able to eat it. Usually, a shlamim you could eat for a whole nother day. Here, you won't be able to. What's going to happen? You're going to end up taking kachim and you're going to bring it lebeis absul. And we know, again, from learning kachim, this is a very bad thing. You're not allowed to bring kachim lebeis absul. So being that there's an element over there of maybe bringing kachim, it's only maybe, if they eat it. But maybe the kachim is going to come lebeis absul. It was over there that Reb Shimon had this kpeda where he said, I don't want you to do a lechatchila unless it's letkune gavra. Right, Reb Shimon is looking out Lutkune Gavra. So that's something that Reb Shimon would allow you to do. Avol Menachos, when it comes to our sugya, where there's no such cheshbon, because Mamanav Shach, regardless of which mincha it is, it's Kachik Kedashim and has the same din. So here the halach is, he would allow it, even lechatchila. The bottom line is, Machlokes Rabbi Yirmiyah and Abaya, whether or not our Mishnah that said Pirashti v'eni yadeya is man Pirashti, Yavi Chameshton, is that the like Reb Shimon or could Shimon Reb Shimon? Reb Yirmiyah says like Reb Shimon. According to Reb Shimon, even if he holds like Reb Yehuda, there's 14 possibilities, not 5. Abaya says that no. Even according to Reb Shimon, despite the fact there are 14 possibilities, right? Just to get this clear, Abaya is not denying the fact there's 14 possibilities in what he might have said, but you could be yoitza all 14 possibilities by bringing the 5. So really, the only nafkamina then between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim would be: do you have to be Maisi or Masni? Do you not have to be Maisi or Masni? Mishnah never got involved in that. The Mishnah said Yavi Chameshtan. Loit the Chachamim Yavi Chameshtan means Anatanai. Loit Reb Shimon Yavi Chameshtan means Mitatanai. But the words Yavi Chameshtan said Abaya could satisfy Shitas Reb Shimon as well. And if that's the case, there's no reason to say that this Mishnah is Deloi Kirab Shimon. So the Gemara now, from where we're up to until where we're going to stop the daf, is going to be mafalful a little bit in trying to understand this idea. This idea that Abaya said that if somebody would make be makabel to bring a mincha. And let's say his t'nai was that I'm going to bring a minchas mafetaner. In Reb Shimon's world, it's going to be mechza chalas, mechza rekikin. But the ratio is going to be 7 chalas and 3 rekikin. You could be yoitz to that by going ahead and bringing 10 chalas and 10 rekikin. Maisi umasni, even lechatchila b'chai, and that's how it's going to work. So there's some technical issues that need to be figured out. Just some, right? You have to figure out just logistically how exactly you're going to go about and do it, and that's what the Gemara is going to focus on. Amalei Rav Papa l'Abai. Rav Papa told Abai, Ulu Reb Shimon, the Amar mechza chalas and mechza rekikin yavi. According to Reb Shimon, who said mechza chalos umechza rekikin yavi, and you're telling me that it can work. Take a full chalos, a full rekikin, and you'll make your cheshbon. You'll somehow be mitzaref it. Hakamaisi isarin echad mishnei isarin v'loig echad mishnei lugin. This should be a little bit of issue. Reb Papa told Abaya, I was always under the impression that the way Shitas Reb Shimon works, when you take a mechza chalis, mechza rekikin is, you take the half a chalis, half a rekikin, you put it into one isarin, you put it into one keli, and you have your mincha. It's like you bring one mincha full of chalis, one kulei rekikin, or I could bring one mincha that's mechza chalis, mechza rekikin. But at the end of the day, if it's one mincha, so that zayin ain't keli, and it has to be together as one isarin. What you're telling me is, I'm going to bring 2 Yisroinas, I'll take a little bit of this Yisarin, a little bit of that Yisarin, and Tzizam, and I'll make myself, it was never in one Yisarin. Essentially what you're doing is, you're being Maisi Yisarin Echad Mishnei Yisroinas. Right, the same is true regarding the Shemen. You're bringing a loig Echad Mishnei Lugan. That works? Doesn't one mincha ultimately have to be in one keli and be brought as one thing? This was Rav Papa's question that he asked Abai. So again, it's not a kasha on Reb Shimon's sheet, because maybe that's how Reb Shimon works. It's an Abaya's understanding. Abaya is saying that you could take 2 Yisroinis and be Maisi Umasni. I hear in Hilchis Tanoim, for that you have Reb Shimon L'Shitasai by the infamous Nazir, who's a Suffolk Nazir Tameh, and who's also a Suffolk Mitzayra Muchlat. But as it relates to the logistical issue in the Menachos problem, the Tanai is gewaldig. But how are you going to make this work? Azoyat Rav Papa gefragt Abaya. So the Gemara says, Abaya told him it's not an issue, because Shamini lay the Reb Shimon Amar. So again, it's Reb Shimon L'Shitasai. Reb Shimon holds him heavy isarin echa mishnei yisroinas v'loig echa mishnei lugan yotza. Happens to be Shitas Reb Shimon. You're making a t'nai. You can't bring a mincha like this. Reb Shimon holds you can always make a mincha like this. Yeah, you can take 2 isroinas. I want a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Even though it was never together in one keli, one isarin, that's going to be okay. If you take a look at Rashi, Reb Shimon, the last line of Rashi, it's the Esh, the bright, the Shira on the bottom. Rashi says, I don't know where this Reb Shimon is, but I'll upon him. That's what Abaye said. There's a Messiah Sadaz Reb Shimon above our pay grade. That Reb Shimon holds that this is something that's okay. Good. Another technical issue that needs to be worked out. Umikmet heichi kametz. How are you doing kmitza? How exactly are you going to do the kmitza? L'chayra, if it's going to be, again, 70% chalas and 30% rekikin, so don't you have to be kaimitz from the 70% chalas and the 30% rekikin? Over here, you're going to do kmitza, obviously, but the kmitza is going to be from 100% chalas, 100% rekikin. How are you going to starve those two things? That's like a little tricky. How are you doing the kmitza? So Mar says, oh, the mas niva amar. Shimon holds you can make tanaim. You're going to make another tanaim. You're going to say like this: chalis lechudayu v'rekikin lechudayu. If I meant 100% chalis or 100% rekikin, amri. If that's what I said, no, the Komitzna mechalis lahavi achalis, and the komitzna merakikin lahavi rakikin. So the komitza for the chalis will be for the chalis, the komitza for the rekikin will be for rekikin. Right? That's easy. In mechza rekikin and mechza chalis, samri. It's said mechza, and whatever the ratio might have been. Well, then the komitzna mechalis. When I do the komitza for the chalis, lahavi mechza chalis and mechza rekikin, I say mefurish. I want it to be for the chalis. The mechza chalos that's in this mana that I have right now, and I also want it to work for the rekikin that's in the other isarin. Udika komitzah rekikin, and when I do the komitz on the rekikin, I say lahavi mechza rekikin mechza chalos. So again, basically you have to make it tonight. As long as you make it tonight, that's going to be okay. But the Gemara says, I still don't understand it. V'habayim mikmetz chad komitz michalos amirakikin. V'ka komitz. To the extent that the person is bringing a mechza chalas, mechza rakikin, the way you understand it is, there has to be a taruvis between the chalas and the rakikin, and from the taruvis you go ahead and you do a kmitza. That's for sure the way it is in the traditional way. So it's one big taruvis, and from the one taruvis, over here you're being mitzaref to tzarif, and you're taking a little bit of the chalas, a little bit of the rakikin. It's 2 separate ma'aseh kmitzas. Forget about being mitzvah of 2 kemitzas. I didn't do 1 chavtz of kemitzah, right? 1 plus 1 is 0, because I never did a kemitzah from the chalis and the rekik and the taroivis. But the Gemara says it's not a problem, because again, we're handling Reb Shimon over here. And Shamina Reb Shimon, you see how Reb Shimon, the end of this daf is? The Amar im kamatz va'olu b'yodai mi echad al shneim yotza. Reb Shimon knows that by the mechza chalis, mechza rekikin, it didn't have to be a kemitzah from the chalis and rekikin. You could take only chalis, and it's going to work for the mechza chalis, mechza rekikin, or only from the Rekikin. The bottom line is, if that works, it could work even if it's in 2 different kelim, because that's the other Shittas Reb Shimon, and it's for that reason, this is going to be okay. But the Gemara says I have another problem, one last problem. Va'ika moiser shemen. What are you going to do with the leftover shemen? There was always leftover shemen. Now, what's the issue with the leftover shemen? I'll tell you why. If he said that I wanted to be mechza chalas and mechza rekikin, moiser hashemen mechza lechalas. The halacha is Reb Shimon, who holds of this mechza chalas mechza rekikin, says that what you do with the moiser hashemen, the leftover shemen, right after you tzink and believe, after you're done with whatever you have to do, so you take the leftover shemen and you mechzer to the chalas. And equal rekikin, if it's all rekikin, Amar Reb Shimon holds that moiser hashemen nachal kehanim. Right, that's the halacha. Moiser hashikin. Moitzer Hashemen, when it comes to Kula Rekikin, is Nachal Kayan. But Moitzer Hashemen, where it's Mechza Chalas, Mechza Rekikin, is Mechzer Lechalas. It is a different din that you're supposed to do with the Shemen. So you're going to go into a carbon Lechatchila and you're going to batch up what you're supposed to do with the Shemen, right? Abaya was like the perfect Jewish attorney. He knocked out everything. He was able to figure out all the Tanayim. He worked it out. He got it. But the problem is, what do you do with the leftover oil? The leftover oil, this is an issue. But the Gemara said, Abaya held Reb Shimon ben Yehuda. He held like the time of Reb Shimon. The time of Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda said, the neighbor Reb Shimon, that in the event that you have a mechza chalas and mechza rekikin, so the halach is moishchan kamin ki, right? Or it's kamin chi. But the bottom line is, you're supposed to do the meshicha kamin ki, right? That Greek letter. U'moiser Hashem, you know to do with the moiser Hashem, and nechal kehanim, it's nechal kehanim. In Reb Shimon ben Yehuda's version of Reb Shimon, you treat the Moiser Hashem by Mechza Chalas, Mechza Rekikin the same way you treat it where it's Kula Rekikin. If that's the case, you don't have 2 different dinim of what you're supposed to do with the Shemen. If that's the case, it's not going to be an issue. Meaning, according to the Tana that holds Ali with the Reb Shimon, that what are you supposed to do with the Moiser Hashem by Mechza Chalas, Mechza Rekikin? You're supposed to put it back in, so then you have a little bit of an issue. Aber Abaya held like Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, and in the world of Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, you do the same thing with it as you would do if it was Kula Rekikin. As a result, check. We were able to literally click all the boxes. And if that's the case, Abaya held you're able to make the Mishnah work. Aliba de Reb Shimon. Exhale. So, as it relates to raid, 2 ha'aris. So, one of the many cases that we had in the Mishnah, one of the less technical cases, was if somebody says, Harei olai mincha. If somebody says, I'm taking upon myself to bring a minchas nadava. So the Tanakama, the Chachamim, and the Mishnah say, Yovi ezoi sheyirtze. You could bring any mincha that you want. Minchas soiles, you could bring a minchas machvas, a minchas marcheshes, you could bring a minchas mafeitaner, oichalos erikikin. By the way, in Reb Shimon's world, there's another bunch of options that you have in terms of mechzachalos, mechzerikikin, and pick the ratio and the proportion that you choose to pick it in. Rabbi Yehuda was chaylik. He said, Yovi minchas asoiles. No. If a person says a real mincha, it's pasha what you have to do. You have to bring the minchas hasoiles, and the reason is shehi miyuchedesh Menachos, because it was the miyuchedesh Menachos. The Gemara brought a brayso where the Tana said hoylu pasach by akos of tchila, that the side of shittas Rabbi Yehuda is it's because the Tana was pasach by tchila, or because the pasuk was Pasach by Tchila, being that the Minchas Soilis is the first one of the Menachos that I mentioned, so it's for that reason, that's the one that you're supposed to bring. There was a whole discussion in the Gemara, how do you reconcile Miyuchedesh Menachos with Hoyl Upasach by Akos of Tchila? What does Miyuchedesh Menachos even mean? Lamaskana, the Gemara said that Miyuchedesh Menachos means it's the only Mincha that has no Shem Levai. What did the Braisa mean when it said Hoylu Poya Bas of Tchila? It wasn't really being moisef anything. It's just a siman of Alma. So the Tzachadash Ba'achav is a siman that Rabbi Yehuda gave us. This is another siman. Hoylu Pasach by Hakos of Tchila. If you take a look at the Rambam in Hilchas Maisa Korbanos, it's Perik Yizayin Aloche Hey. The Rambam says, if somebody says a re'olai mincha, Yavi achas mechameshes minei menachos habois beneda benedava. You could bring one of the 5 menachos that are brought beneda benedava. If you take a look at the Nois Kalim, they all say the Makar to the Rambam is the Mishnah Mesechtes Menachos Daf Kuf Daled Amud Beis, the first Mishnah of the last parak of Mesechtes Menachos, and the Rambam paskin like the Tanakama, like the Chachamim, not like Rabbi Yehuda, which in Klali Apsak makes sense because Rabbi Yehuda is a Yochid Keneged the Chachamim who are the Rabbim, and Yochid v'Rabbim Malachik Rabbim. So, not surprisingly, the Rambam paskins that Ha'omer Arei Olai Mincha not Yovi Minchas Hasoiles because it's the Miyuchedes Shebe Menachos, but rather Yovi Achas Mechameshes Mine Menachos Habois Bened Benadav. Stating that the Mishnah Melech often art is Mitzayin Rashi and Chumash. Rashi, right in the beginning of the Parasha of the Menachos, this is Vayikra Perek Beis Pasuk Aleph. V'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincha l'Hashem soiles yeh korbanoi. V'yatzak aleh Hashem v'nasan aleh levayin. Zuk the Heilige Rashi. Soiles yeh korbanoi. Ha'omer harei olai mincha stam. If somebody says harei olai mincha stam, maybe mincha soiles. He brings the minchas hasoiles. Shehi rishayna shebe menachos. Because this is the first of the menachos. Rashi is quoting Shitas Rabbi Yehuda and said to Mishnah Melech that b'mus chorishin it sounds like Rashi in this machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim was machriya like Rabbi Yehuda, not like the Chachamim. And at first glance, divrei Rashi atzrichen bir. Because why would Rashi go like Rabbi Yehuda the loika Chachamim l'chayra? The Rambam is gerecht and klali apsak machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim for sure the halacha is like the Chachamim. Yochid v'Rabbim malachik Rabbim. Right, just to be clear, machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. We spoke about that the other day. Rabbi Yehuda the Posek, Muriana the Bei Rebbe. Of course, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda connected many of his Bali Pluk that we're going to pass like Rabbi Yehuda. But this is Rabbi Yehuda connected all the Chachamim. And Yochid v'Rabbim Malachik Rabbim, which is why the Rambam paskin the way he paskin. But Rashi and Chumash seems to be not that way. So the Mishnah Melech says, take a look at the Re'im. Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrachi's Pirish on Rashi, and you'll see how the Re'im was miyash of this Rashi. The Re'im asks this kasha. Va'afal pisha ein halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda, ela k'chachamim she'amru mevi me'ezah sheyirtza. Zok the Re'im, afal pikein, pirish hamikra hazeh al daitoi, liyois korev l'pshutei shal mikra. Rashi, when he was mefarish this pasuk, he was mefarish al pshutei shal mikra. And in pshutei shal mikra, Rashi held, it's more mashma, it's more mistaber shitas Rabbi Yehuda and the shitas HaChachamim. V'kvar pirashnu pa'amim rabbis, says the Re'im. We've explained this already many times. Shaharav, referring to Rashi, lo yechavin b'pirish HaChumash elozeh. When he wrote his pirish on Chumash, he's not writing a Shulchan Aruch. He's cheshbenim pshutei shal mikra. K'may shegiloi daitei b'pasik vayishmos koil Hashem Elokim esalich began Bereshis Gimel Ches. And what does Rashi famously say over there? Ani loy basi ela lefarish pshutei shal mikra. So says the Re'im, throughout my commentary on Rashi, I was megal to this Inyan that Rashi's mahalach when it comes to his pirish ala Torah is ani loy basi ela lefarish pshutei shal mikra. And being that that's the case, says the Re'im, Rashi held that in pshutei shal mikra it's more mashma Rabbi Yehuda. Why? So open the Chumash, you'll see. The pasuk says as follows: V'nefesh, that's the first word in the parasha of the mincha. Ki sakriv korban mincha l'Hashem. If a person's going to bring a korban mincha, soiles yeh karbanai. His mincha should be a mincha soiles. V'yatzak aleh hashemen, v'nasan aleh levaina. V'hevi al b'nei Aharon hakihanim, v'kamatz misham alei kumtzai, v'chulu v'chulu. Skipping pasuk dalid. V'chi sakriv korban mincha mafi saner. What's going to be if the person isn't just being sakriv korban mincha l'Hashem? He wants to bring a mincha mafi taner. Oh, soiles chalis matzes belulois. V'mincha al machavas. V'minchas marcheshes. Azoi. In pshutei shal mikra, v'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincha l'Hashem. Soiles yeh karbanoi. It's only when he starts getting involved, I want it to be azai, I want it to be azai. So then the Torah lays out a different mahalach of how you're supposed to do it. In pshutei shal mikra, it sounds like ha'omer arei olai mincha, the person that's v'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincha l'Hashem, soiles yeh karbonoi. It's not soiles yeh karbonoi because he said arei olai mincha soiles. All he was a v'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincha l'Hashem. We're telling you, if that's what you took upon yourself, soiles yeh karbonoi. Unless you tell me otherwise. Unless it's ki sakriv korban mincha ma'afitana v'chulu v'chulu. So Dr. Re'im that even though in the sugya in Kabbalah he nekabel the halacha is like the Chachamim, but when it comes to pshutei shal mikra, Rabbi Yehuda jumps off the page. Why is this interesting? It's interesting because there was a whole discussion in the Gemara what Rabbi Yehuda even meant. It's miyuchedes shebe menachos hayul poel ba'akasav tchila. It's the only one of the menachos that have no shame levai. It's the pshutei shal mikra. Ad Kedei Kach, the Gemara is not reckoning with the Pshutei Shal Mikra, that we had all these different Mahalchim, what Pshat and Rabbi Yehuda might be, and none of them were the Pshutei Shal Mikra. And by the way, all the Pshatim that the Gemara gave in Rabbi Yehuda, Rashi is not going with, because Rashi knows the Chachamim were Chaylik in Rabbi Yehuda in that. And the halacha is going to be like the Chachamim, but there's a world of Pshat. And in the world of Pshat, this is the Pshutei Shal Mikra. It's a pella that this Pshat didn't even make it into our Sugya. Unless you're going to tell me that when the Gemara says, the less shem levoy. This is really the oimek. The Gemara means what the Re'im says, but it's not the pasha pshan and what the Gemara means. But al kapanim, again, I just thought it was a very, very interesting ha'ara. Rashi is mefarish the pasuk like Rabbi Yehuda, not because he passes like Rabbi Yehuda. If Rashi would have written a Mishnah Torah like the Rambam in his Perek Yizayin Aloche Hilchas Ma'isa al Karbanos Valta Geschriben Punklich what the Rambam wrote. It's just over here he was learning and al derech pshat, and he was writing a commentary to explain the Pshutei Shal Mikra. In the Pshutei Shal Mikra, he felt Rabbi Yehuda's shita conforms much better, and that's why he was mefarish al pi shitas Rabbi Yehuda, not al pi the halacha, the shita of the Chachamim. That's the first hara. The second hara is, this is a little bit me'inyan le'inyan ba'oisa inyan. So we have a shayla, harei olai mincha. According to the Chachamim, yavi eza sheyirtza. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be dafka the minchas hasoiles. The Mishnah said shimi yuchedesh eben menachos. The Gemara brought a brayso and said that Rabbi Yehuda explained, or the Tan explained, I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda, Tana haylu pasach be'akos of tchila. Because if you open up and you look at the first of the 5 menachos that are mentioned in Vayikra Perek Beis, it's the Minchas HaSoilos. And the Gemara asks the Kasha, if somebody says, Arei Olai Oila, like Rabbi Yehuda, you should look at which Oila is mentioned first, and you know which one is mentioned first, the Ben Bakar. So you should have to bring the Ben Bakar. Or if somebody says, Arei Olai Oila Min Atzoin, you should look at which one of the Tzoin is mentioned first, and you know which one is mentioned first, it's the Keves, so you should have to bring a sheep. Or if somebody says, Arei Olai Oila Min Oifois, you should have to bring the Torah ahead of the Bnei Yoina, and you don't find ever that there should be such a Rabbi Yehuda. If Rabbi Yehuda holds Haylu Pasah by a Kas of Tchila, that is a Koveya, then l'chayr, how come when it comes to the Oila you don't find that? And for that reason the Gemara came around, and the Gemara said that Enochinami Haylu Pasah by a Kas of Tchila is just in a manik, it's a Simen Ba'alma. It's a way to remember it's a Minchas HaSoilos, and the reason it's a Minchas HaSoilos is because it's Miyuchedesh Eben Menachos, and the reason it's Miyuchedesh Eben Menachos is the only one of the Menachos that doesn't have this Shem Levi. I saw in the Megadim Chadashim, in one of his earlier shtiklach in Sefer Vayikra from Hagoyin Hagadol, Rab David Yoel Weisshlita, he brings a fascinating Maramakim tucked away. It's a drasha that Rabbi Yaakov Emden gave. It's printed in the Sefer Hakshurim LeYaakov. So if you have the Sefer Hakshurim LeYaakov, it's page Kuf Lamed Beis. It's a long drasha. And Rabbi Yaakov Emden in that drasha says an unbelievable chiddush. He says that in the event that somebody had an obligation to bring a korban chatas, it was Mechal Shabbos b'shoigig, Shavi Beis HaMikdash, he has a chiyuv to bring a chatas shmeina. We know the Torah says that a regular yachid has 2 choices when it comes to bringing the korban chatas. He could bring either a kispa or a seir, right? In terms of what animal and exactly how a chatas was brought, there's a whole mesechta dedicated to that. It's called mesechta Sarius. It's a mesechta that's miyot hakamus, but it's roiv ha'echos, not the easiest mesechta in Shas. But the bottom line is that when it comes to the regular pedestrian, a regular yachid that is chayiv to bring a korban chatos, so he can pick. You can bring either a kispa, or if you want to bring a seira, that's something you can bring as well. Stating that, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, that I hold that this person that's bringing the korban chatos should bring lichatchila the seira, and only afterwards, if he has no option to bring the seira, then he should bring the kispa. Why? Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, because you look in the Psukim and Parshas Vayikra, when the Torah mentions the korban chatos, the Torah first mentions the option of the seiras izin, and then afterwards it mentions v'im keves yavi korban the chatos nekevet tmima yivien. Being that it mentions first the seira and then the kifsa, so it's for that reason it should be done dafka in that order. As also for Yaakov Emden. Yaakov Emden went weiter in this drasha, and he said, I'm going to tell you even more. In the event that somebody said Harei Olai Shlamim, And a shlamim we know is shalem, right? You can bring it in many different options. And certainly you can bring it in the form of a keves or in the form of an ace. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, you should bring it lechatchila in a keves and only b'diavad in an ace. Why? He says, because I'm reading the psukim. V'menatzoin karbanai, as it relates to the shlamim. Zocher in a keva, tami yakrivenu. Im keves u'makrives karbani v'ikrivaisa lefnei Hashem. 10 psukim later, v'im eis karbonoi v'ekriva l'fnei Hashem. We mentioned first the keves and then the eis, and it's for that reason it should be done in that order. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden, in this drasha said a chiddush, that when it comes to the chatos, kizba is seira, first the seira, then the kizba. When it comes to the shlamim, as it relates to the shaila of keves versus soir, or the zachar, or the nekeva, the keves has the mila. Why? He says, just look at the Seder HaPsukim. In the Seder HaPsukim by the chatos, it mentions first the Seira, and the Seder HaPsukim as it relates to the Shlamim, it mentions first the Keves, and you go basa the Seder, and it's for that reason, that's the way that you're supposed to do it. Now, at first glance, this Rabbi Yaakov Emden is an unbelievable chiddush, because we have a Gemara, where the Gemara seemed to touch on this inyan. Now, the Gemara never discussed the chatos, and the Gemara never discussed the shlamim. What the Gemara discussed was the mincha and the oila. But at the end of the day, the Gemara entertained the tzad of hoilu, Pasach by Akos of Tchila. Right, the Gemara had such a Havamina, but at the end of the day, the Gemara fell off of it, and the Gemara was Daichet, stating that Zok Rabbi Yaakov Emden this Chiddush, and this is something that he talks about very much by Arichas in that Rosh. So David Yoel Weiss, Kedarke Bakodesh, with his incredible Bekiyas, knew this Rabbi Yaakov Emden, and it's Zeichen the Tzu, and he's mefalful, he's meirich in it a little bit. Again, a chiddush at Muschorishin in light of our sugya, it's a chiddush in light of other sugyas as well. Ayin Sham. But there's one davar nifla that he's mitzayin, and that long shmuz, and that is that what Rabbi Yaakov Emden said as it relates to the chatos, and that is that when it comes to the chatos, you have two choices, to bring either the kispa or the seira. You should bring first the seira and then the kispa, because it's mentioned first. The emes is, he says it's a mefurish Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar is in the Hashmatis on Bereshis, Daf Reish Samach Amid Aleph. The Zohar says as follows. The Zohar says that if kadchav bekulu mitzvahs loisasei the ispu kares, if somebody goes ahead and he's over one of the loisasei sheyesh by kares, seiras izin boyi lekarva lechatchila. Lechatchila, you should go ahead and you should bring a seiras izin. Elo kad lesle, but if he doesn't have it, yakriv kizba, he should bring a kizba. So he said that as it relates to that chelik of Rabbi Yaakov Emden's chiddush, it's a mefurish Zohar. The Gemara maybe is a little bit not so mashma that way, but it's a Zohar HaKadosh in the Hashmatis, and the Zohar is mamish mefurish, that lechatchila seira season boy lekarva lechatchila, literally, elokad lesle the yakriv kizba. It's only if you don't have it, then there would be an inyan to bring it, as a kizba. The emes is, Rabbi David Yoel Weiss said that if you look in the Lashon HaPsukim, it's very mashma that way. He says, why? He says, if you look by the Korban Chatos, it says, V'im nefesh achas techeta b'shkaga me'am ha'aretz b'asoysa achas mi'mitzvahs Hashem asher lo yisei osena v'oshem. Oy hoida elav chatosei asher chata v'hevi karbonoi seiras izin tmima nekeva al chatosei asher chata. Now I'm skipping. V'im keves yavi karbonoi lechatos nekeva tmima yivienu. By the keves, it says, V'im keves yavi karbonoi. By the seiras izin, it doesn't say v'im. It says, V'hevi karbonoi seiras izin. If you're not sure it's a look at the Asham. By the Asham it says Ve'im minat soin karbano lezevach shlamim lashem. Not the Asham, the shlamim. Ve'im minat soin karbano lezevach shlamim lashem. Zocher in the cave Tommy Yakrivenu. Im keves umakrives karbano ve'krivayis lefnei Hashem. Ve'im eis karbano ve'krivay lefnei Hashem. By the other karbanis, every time we mention one of the options, we always preface that option with the word ve'im, as opposed to when it comes to the chatos, the kispa we preface with ve'im, but the seiras izim we don't preface with ve'im. It's because the chatchila, like the Zohar HaKadosh says, it's supposed to be the seiras izim. Ve'im, keves, umakriv, okay? Then it should be a nekeva, it should be a tmima, that's the way you're supposed to do it. But al kapanim, as it relates to what you're supposed to be doing the chatchila, this is what you're supposed to be doing the chatchila. Toich dvarav, in this shtickle, the Megadim Chadashim says, take a look at the chibur called Kotche Yecheskel. That's printed in the back of the Sefer Meir Enei Chachamim Madura Kama Simin Yud Zayin. I looked up the Zohar HaKadosh that Reb David Yoel Weiss quotes in the Hashmatis Daf Reish Samach Amud Aleph. So in our Chabura we know that Reuven Margolis wrote a Pirush. She wrote a commentary on the Zohar HaKadosh. It's called Nitzotzei Zohar, and it's really like a Mesiris Hashas on the Zohar. And on this Zohar, the Reb Reuven Margolis also says, he's Mitzayin, he says, take a look at this country is called Koche Yecheskel. Take a look at the Koche Yecheskel on the back of the Meir Enei Chachamim Madura Kama Simin Yud Zayin. So the two Sinais, the two Bekim Gedolim, both sent us to the same address. So I don't know about you, but if Reb Reuven Margolis and Reb David Yoel Weiss, Lahavdol Ben Chaim L'Chaim, send me to the same place, I make a beeline. Baruch Hashem happened to have the Sefer Meir Enei Chachamim Madura Kama, and I took a look at this shtickle, and was steht es azoi. So who was the Koche Yecheskel? So the Meir Enei Chachamim Kiyudua was Meir Yechiel Halevi, the Ostrof Tzagoyin, who, if you know, was one of the great Goyinim in Poland, one of the greatest Rebbes, but he was a Goyin Olam, Kiyudua. After he passed away, his son, Rabbi Yecheskel Halevi, he became the next Ostrof Rebbe, and in the back of that Meir Enei Chachamim, they have some shtiklach Torah from him. So in Siman Yud Zayin, it says, Be'inyan Kedimas Kifsa L'Se'ira. This is what he's talking about. And he starts off, B'Zohar HaKadosh Parshas Bereishis. He didn't bring Rabbi Yaakov Emden. He started with the Zohar. In the Hashmata, it's mavur an unbelievable chiddush. And that is that even though there's a sugi in Shas when it comes to Kedima, Vasir, versus Akeves, Harei Alai Oyla, and the sugi of Menachos, but the Zohar HaKadosh state Klor Diburim. And that is that when it came to the Karban Chatos, first you're supposed to bring the Sira season, and only afterwards, if you don't have the Sira season, so then a B'diavad, you should go ahead and you should bring a Kifsa. So he says a few beautiful Zachen. Now, this whole shtickle is a very Polish, a pilpul shtickle, which is mamish, he's tying in every single sugi command and kachim. That's almost not a guzma. You have to see what's going on over there. It's way beyond the scope. But the bottom line is, just a few ha'aras. One ha'ara is, he says, take a look at the Rambam in Hilchas Tmidim Umusafim. This is in Perik Tes Halacha Zayin. So the Rambam over there says as follows. What would be if there's a kohen standing in the Beis HaMikdash, and there's two people that have to bring a Karban Chatas, and one person brings a Se'ira, and the other person brings a Kizba. Says the Rambam, U'Se'iras Yachid Koidem Es L'Kifsa. Then in a situation like this, you bring first the Se'ira, then the Kifsa. Afal Pisha Shneim Chatas, like the Rambam. Even though they're both Chatois. Meaning, I know there's different halachis and kedima when it comes to different types of karbanis, but this is a chatas and this is a chatas, and these are two options, the two ways you can do it. So mehecha one should have kedima over the other. Says the Rambam Mishtakal Torah, sha'asiira ru'uya lavai ala krisus shemevian alei chatas v'hakifsa ina ba al shigagas avodah zarah. Take a look at the Kasem Mishnah. Kasem Mishnah explains the Rambam as follows. He says, we know that a regular Chatas Yochid can be either a Kifsa or a Se'ira. But when it comes to Avodah Zarah, the Torah says it has to be Dafka the Se'ira. So being that the Se'ira always had to be the one for Avodah Zarah, so he says, Meris, there's some Maila, there's some Toisefes, Madrega, that you see the Se'ira has over the Kifsa, and it's for that reason, Zok the Rambam, if the Kohen has a choice to bring two Chatois, one is a Se'ira, one is a Kifsa, there's no reason that one should have a Kedim over the other. Now the Makar to this Rambam is a sugi and Hoiri stuff. You'd give him a lion shot. But the bottom line is, this is what the Rambam says. Said Rabbi Cheskel Halevi me Ostrovtza. He says, if you take a look at the Rambam, two Rambams later in Halacha Tes, there the Rambam's talking about we have a kohen, and the kohen has a bunch of different karbonis, different animals that are in front of him. And there's a question, which animal should come first? And the Rambam says, right? A bunch of oilers, a bunch of shlamim, a bunch of anything. And you have all these different animals. What should you bring first? Ketzad krevim, haparim koidmen le'elim, shekein nisrabu b'nesachim. Ve'elim koidmen le'kvasim, shekein nisrabu b'nesachim. U'kvasim koidmen le'seirin, shekein nisrabu be'emurim. Ha'omer koidem lekevesh, abba imay, u'shtei alechem koidem l'shnei kvasim, etc., Einstein. Over here the Rambam says mefurish, u'kvasim koidem l'seirin, shekein nisrabu be'emurim. 2 halachas earlier, the Rambam said if a kohen's standing and 2 chatois came to him, and you have a shaila, which one to bring? You bring the sira over the kifsa. The Rambam was sois and mishnasai, 2 halachas from each other, and the Kesef Mishnah muches with this a little bit. Zogt the Ostrovtza Goyin Rabbi Cheskel Lev Me Ostrovtza. That l'chayre yesh loima. You have to say it's part. Dosh in Rambam. I'm Kesef Mishnah. You have to say what's the chilik here. The Rambam was handling 2 chatois. There was handling any other carbon. Chatas is different. Why is chatas different? So the Rambam gave a term. The Rambam said because the seir of the chatas you see is more effective. Why should chatas be different? If ordinarily the keves comes first, because there's more imurim when it comes to the keves, and that's the reason for it to have a ktima. Why when it comes to the chatas is it different? Zogt yesh loima. You know what the makar to the Rambam was? The makar was the Zohar HaKadosh. Al zeh nemar harambam v'azoyar. The makar was the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh that said that the yochid alain, when the yochid came to bring his carbon, there's an Indian to bring first what? First the seir and then the keves. Like the pasuk says, the heavy siras of im keves. Oh, but l'chatchil this is what you're supposed to do. So if when it comes to the yochid alain, you see there's a mila of bringing the seir season. So when it comes to the kohen, it's 2 different people that are bringing it, and you're not sure which one you're supposed to be bringing. So it's mistaber, it's yitachin. That when it comes to you doing that, this is the way that you should do it as well. So he said that it could be this is the yishuv, this is pshat, and this is pshat in this Rambam. Makes another hafaldige dik in this shtickle. He says that if you take a look in the psukim, so we just mentioned the pasuk that says very clearly that when it comes to the chatas, first the Torah says the seiras izin, right? The Torah says, and then only several psukim later, he says, take a look at the carbon oil v'yoret. By the carbon oil v'yoret, the pasuk says as follows: "V'nefesh kisechet v'shama kol olav who aid oyra oyada im lo yagid v'nas avoyin oy nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tamei oy benivlas chayit meya oy benivlas beimet meya oy benivlas sheretz tamei v'nel mimenu v'hu tamei v'yashem oy v'chulu." All the different types of people that are shnayich to bring in the carbon oil v'yoret. So the pasuk says, "V'hoya ki yeshem la'achas me'ela v'hisvada asher chata olav v'hivi es hashamoy." He has to bring his carbon. So what's the carbon that he brings? Ve'hevi es hashamoy l'Hashem al chatosay asher chata nekeva min hatzoin kispa oy seiras izim l'chatos. By the carbon oil of Yored state fakert. Over there it says first the kispa and then it says the seira. So he said that take a look at the Zohar HaKadosh again. The Zohar HaKadosh said as follows. The Zohar says, V'sir l'chatas l'kabel knesses Yisrael d'manu min abrachon. Says kadchav bekulu mitzvahs loisasei de isbu kares. If you find a person that was over one of the loisasei sheyesh by kares, seiras izin boy lekar v'lechatchila elokad lesle de yakriv kispa. If a person is chayiv to be a chatas, why? Because he was chav bekulu mitzvahs loisasei de isbu kares. The carbon oil of Yored is given a chatas, but the oil of Yored has nothing to do with kares. Because the oil of Yored is true for someone who is oivish for his bitui. The oil of Yored is true for different halachas. And being that over there there's no din that it has to be for chayve kristas and under a sort chatas. It's dafka the chatas that's being brought for the chayve kristas. That's where it's true. But the carbon oil of Yored was hot nicht mit chayv. Now, grad the Tumas Mikdash v'Kadosh has its ad chorus, but the Ramban al Atayr, his Mitzayin already says that it's not included in the regular chayv krisis. Ayin shom. But the bottom line is that when it comes to the chatas that's being brought for chayv krisis, that chatas there Dr. Zohar HaKadosh the seir izim comes first, but other chatois, what's the other chatois? It's the oil of Yored, there's nothing else. When it comes to the oil of Yored, over there, fakert, over there you don't have that pay. There's Dr. Mameduyik in the psukim. As when it comes to the chayve krisis, there the Torah went out of its way, and the Torah said that first, the heavy carbonate sirasism only for im kevas yavi carbonate. But fakert, when it comes to the oil of Yored, so then already the Torah says, kizba oise iras izam lechatos. And the hezbad varim is the Rambam. The hezbad is that Rambam. Where the Rambam says, that when it comes to the Chayvei Krisos, being that you find by Chayvei Krisos Avodah Zarah, it's Davke the Seir. So that's why there's a Milo of the Seir. Oil of Yoyer has nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. It's a different sugi of Chatas. Over there, the diak in the Zoyer, which really comes from the diak in the Psukim, Mamish L'Shoinei Azov, this is the way he went ahead, and he was Mavayir this Indian. Then he goes ahead and he says, let me tell you a little bit of a svara. What would be the reasons? Okay, the Rambam gave a tam. He says, I'm going to want to be Moisef and Neufach. What would be maybe the reason? Why there's a Milo with the Siras Izim over the Kizba? So he tells to a Gemara, Masach the Soita, Daf Lamed Beis, Lamed Beis. This Gemara is a classic. The Gemara says, Gufa, Amar Rab Yochanan Mishum Rab Shimon ben Yochai. It's another Gemara about Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Mipnei Matik Nu Tefillah B'Lachash. Why is it the Chazal and Masakin that Shemayna Etzvei should be B'Lachash? Shaloi Levayesh is Oivei Avera. The reason is not to embarrass over Avera. Because we know the Chatas, the Shchitas Betzafin, and the Oila, the Shchitas Betzafin. And being that the Torah, you see, went out of its way to put the Chatas and the Oila in the same place, Torah must be looking to protect over Avera. What does that mean? That means if someone had to bring a Chatas, if his carbon would have to be in a special place in the Azara, everybody would chap, he has to bring a Chatas. It'd be embarrassing. So not to embarrass the over Avera, we say you're going to bring the Chatas in the same place you bring the Oila. Nobody's going to ever know you're bringing a Chatas. Maybe what you're bringing is an oil. But the Gemara says, V'loy, is that true? There's no way to be mavchem between a chatas and an oila. V'ikadamim. Dam chatas l'mayla, v'dam oila l'mata. The dam went in a different place. The Gemara says, Hasam koyin with the other. Only the koyin knows. Right, you have hippo with the koyin. He's not going to tell anybody. So over there, you have nothing to worry about. But the oilam doesn't know. And as a result, you're not going to be embarrassed. What about the fact that the chatas is in a keva and the oila is a zachar? So the Gemara says, the animal has a tail, and the tail hides whether it's a zachar or a keva. The Gemara says, that's all good if you're bringing a kesev or a keves. What if it's a seira? The seira doesn't have the tail, and if that's the case, you can have no way of knowing. The Gemara says, true. We're looking out to protect you. We want you to be protected, not to be embarrassed. If you decided to go ahead and to bring a seira as opposed to a kifsa, you had a way out. You had a way to protect yourself. You could have brought the keves. You decided to bring the seira, and being decided to bring the seira, it's for that reason. This is not on our cheshbon. Said Rabbi Cheskel Alevi Me'Ostrovtza that you see in this Gemara. That when a person brought his chatas with a seira, as opposed to bringing it with a kifsa, there was a boishes that he got, which gave him a certain madrega of kaparas avainis. It even sounds like the etzem, the Torah would have told you that's really what you should do. But Vaz, the Torah had rachmanis on you, and the Torah said you don't have to do it. If you want to bring a kifsa, you can bring a kifsa. Oh, but that's passion in the world of kapara, in the world of sigufim, in the world of tikkunim. Boishes is mechaper, ba'ofen nifla v'noira ad lama'oi. When the Yid brought the seira, he had boishes. When the Yid brought the kifsa, Hatanishka had kam boishes. And being that in this case he had the boishes, in this case he didn't have the boishes. So it's for that reason there's a mile of going ahead and bringing the snira season. Just one more ha'ara from this beautiful shtickle that he said over. At the very, very end, he says, Achrei kosvias kol zeh. He said, I remembered that there's a Rashi in Chumash, a Rashi in Parshas Lech Lecha, Rashi by the Bris Bein Absarim. Hashem tells Avraham Avinu by the Bris Bein Absarim, Vayomer Elov, Choli egla mishuleshes, ve'ez mishuleshes, va'ayil mishulosh, v'tar v'goysel. Kadosh Baruch Hu essentially told Avraham Avinu to take all the animals that one day would be able to be brought as karbanos. Take the eagle, take the aiz, take the ayil, which is the male keves, take the tar, and take the geisel. Right? These are all the animals that are able to go on the mizbech. In fact, Rashi says that the reason Hashem told Avraham Avinu to take this was a remiz to all the different karbanos. Egla mishuleshes shloisha golim, remiz l'shloisha parim, parim akipurim, parim davar shal tzibur, ve'egla arufa. Ve'ez mishuleshes, remiz l'sira nasa b'fnim, u'si'irei musafin shal moyed, u'si'ires chatas yochid. Va'ayil mishulesh, osham vadai, va'osham talui, v'kivso shal chatas yochid. V'tar v'goizel, that's the Torah in the Ben Yoino. So he said he always learned this Rashi, that why was it the Eibush the first said ve'ez mishuleshes and then the ayol mishulesh? So he said he always assumed it was because the Eiz are all chatois. It's the remes, the Sara nasa b'fnim, and it's the sirei musafin and the sirei chatas yochid. As opposed to the ayol mishulesh, that's the osham vadai, it's the osham talui, which are both ashamis. So the reason we said Eis Mushuleshes before Ayel Mushulish, because one is a Chatos, other was an Asham, and in Perikalatoder Menachos Daf Peites, Chatos is Koidemes LaAsham. And being that Chatos is Koidemes LaAsham, so it made sense, first Eis Mushuleshes and then Ayel Mushulish, all the Korbanis that the Eis represent. But he said, always mutched me a little bit, because one of the Ayel Mushulishes is the Kivsa Shal Chatos Yachid. Das is Eichet HaChatos. So if das is Eichet HaChatos, they're both Chatos. So he says, no, Pasha Pshat is. These are three chatois. This is one chatos and two ashamois. So the three chatois are going to come first. But he says, Achri kol zeh, I realize that mameduyik, because even that kivsa shal chatos yachid comes after the serious chatos yachid. Kimavu b'zayir HaKadosh. Kimavu the dik and the psukim with the tushal to the Rambam Perek Tesel Chasmidim HaMusafin with a little bit of a hezber based on the Gemara in Soita Daf Lamed Beis, that when it comes to the serious chatos yachid versus the kivsa shal chatos yachid, the series of Chatas Yachid also comes first, and that's why even in the Brisbane Absalom, every cheluk of this Rashi is meduyik. Remes l'sara nasa b'fnim v'sir musavin shalmoid u'siras Chatas Yachid. All three of them are koydem to the Asham Vadai, the Asham Talui, and the Kivsa Shal Chatas Yachid. Achenegel in Yonenu, the series Chatas Yachid is koydemes to the Kivsa Shal Chatas Yachid. Either way, ad kan dvarav akshdoishem in this Chibur Kodshe Yecheskel from the Ostrovtzer going. I just want to end that when Rabbi Margolis quoted the Ostrovtzer Goyen, so he says Hashem Yimkom Damai, which I understood meant that he must have been the Rebbe at the time of the Holocaust, at the time of the war, and he was killed by the Nazis. So I looked at the beginning of this Kuntris, this Chibur Kodshe Yecheskel, and what I saw blew my mind. There's a little bit of a Hakdama that was written by one of the Chassidim, one of the Talmidim of this great guy. His name was Chaim Yitzchak Wohlgelerner. I just want to read a little bit just to get a little bit of a feel. So this Yid, Chaim Yitzchak Wohlgelerner, lived in Ostrovtza, and when the Nazis came, they killed his wife, and they killed his father, they killed his mother, and they killed his sister. And he had to run away. And he was hiding in the attic of a barn by some Polish Eina Yehudi. While he was sitting Shiva for his father, his mother, and his sister, he got word that the Nazis can finish doing their thing. They killed the Rebbe and his 7 sons. His entire family was wiped out. And he says, I'm sitting here in the middle of the Avelos, and I just got word that the Rebbe and his 7 sons were killed, and he says, I want to write a little bit of a kinna. This is Pulitzer Prize worthy. I can't read the whole thing because it's too long, but just mamish atoyamet to get a little bit of a sense what's going on. Rotov u'misboises. Said, I'm wet and I'm immersed bidmei avi imi v'achoisi, in the blood of my father, my mother, and my sister. Sheniktafu b'mei ktsir hadamim, who were taken away, right, at a very, very young age. Badad atov ba'avelos kfula. I'm by myself, and I'm wrapped in a double kfelos. Levavi hanikra l'gzarim. He said, not only my clothing, but my heart is torn into pieces. Yoshev ani ba'aliyas refes bakar. I'm sitting in the aliyah, in the attic of a refes bakar, of a barn. Nechba, I'm hiding. B'mistorim tifka nafshi. And in my hiding, I'm sitting and I'm crying. Nidhamti pislaim. And then all of a sudden, as this was going on, I was bewildered because I heard meharetzach hanoira shal rabbeinu v'shiva bana b'yoyim echad imay. With the Rebbe and his 7 sons were killed on one day. V'satura ma'ela l'zichrei hakadosh ukdashti. So these next lines, this little poetry that I'm writing, I'm being makdish. L'zeichen nishmasai. Yoshev le Rabbeinu shakua b'rayonav v'sefer hazayah lefanav. So the Rebbe would sit and he was shakua b'rayonav and he had the sefer hazayah open in front of him. Chavush tefillin b'roshai v'talisay mu'utav al kseifav. Says the last time I saw him, he had been fasting already for 3 days because of the impending Gzeira, and he was trying to stop it. Kabbalah hu Isaac. He was being Isaac in Kabbalah. Limtzoi pisrein l'shelos hamenakris b'moichai. To try to come up with a pisrein, some eitzah to the questions that were being menakris, that were banging on his head. Oisnoi ve'esbenoi. And if that's the case, If there's a din of oisay ves benoid leis tishchat b'yom echad, then lama gzeirei reisna, how come we're witnessing this? Here hurim umachshavos mitzroitzes and b'moicha shalois tzaddik. There were her hurim and machshavos that were flying, they were floating around the mind of this great tzaddik. Lama ani. Ma pa'alti b'chayi v'chiloi igal arik v'chein anachnu talmidov hamisatkim tachas hashpa'asei hakbira yimei chayav u'puloisav heim lanu l'semel mazir u'lasbaklarya ha'me'ira. And he goes on, he talks about how great he was, and he was the son of this great tzaddik. He was the ben Yochid of the famous Ashraf Tzagoyin. He says, maflik b'shvacham. I'm skipping all the way to the end. Mesiris nefesh, anivus his batless ho'inkiyos, ahavas Yisrael l'chol ish poshet v'tomim, skuloi so'ela ho'anivus upashtus, tova b'lev talmidav v'chol abam elav l'darshai, regesh tomer v'haratzam yuchedes hoyoloi l'chidushav shebenigla v'nistar. But from all the things that he was ma'arich in life, he had a regesh, a special regesh miyuchad for his chidushim benigla v'nistar, v'zuchrani be'esa machnu b'ra'asai. I remember when we got smicha, Kadavino bar Shifsar, when I was only 17 years old. Bochar bi Rabbeinu mi bein Talmidav. The Rebbe chose me from all his Talmidim, l'sader chidushav u'la'atikam b'sefer. That one day I should be the one that's going to be Mesader's chidushim and I'm going to put them on a sefer. Tzror maftecha shal argis aksovim masa biyodi. He says he gave me mamish the chest of all his ksovim. V'sochli. And then he told me, Hey lecha chayim Yitzchak, u'shmor. He says, please watch this. He says, Man ha'achroin, haredifos v'gerushim, haretzichos v'achzorios, tzaris Yisrael, churbenan dochu rucha v'nishmasai. The last kufa were very hard for him. V'yispoided Rabbeinu, the Rebbe was bespoided this, u'meshoited ba'ilomais haruchniim al yoinim, and he was drang sich in ba'ilomais haruchniim. Kabbalah hu oisek, he was being oisek in Kabbalah. U'mechapis pisroin le'elo in yonim aniskaven, and he was trying to come up with some pisroin for these hoichas achen. Lo pesa pisroin. Hey, all of a sudden, while he was trying to figure this out, Parat ha'oyev, v'nirtzach Rabbeinu, v'shiva banav imai, hakushya shel oisev es benoi, v'gam ha'sheila ha'yeshana, hazu teira v'zu schara, lo'matzu pisroinan, adheina. I mean, the poetry is off the rails. This is what he writes. On the bottom of this is a little bit of a footnote. The footnote is that this Yid, Reb Chaim Yitzchak Wolgalanter, he spent the rest of the war years in the attic of this Refes Bakar. And he was Moise Nefesh, he had the Ksovim with the Rebbe, and he was Masada them, and he was writing them. And then, when Poland was liberated from the Germans, he came out, and he was a free man. And he was walking around, and a Polish guy saw him, and he killed him. He killed him for no reason, but he killed him. So this Yid, Chaim Yitzchak Wolgalanter, he too was killed by the Palakin. Yemach Shemam v'zichron. Hashem Yimkom Damvai. He had a brother. His brother's name was Yaakov David. And Yaakov David knew where his brother had been hiding, and he knew that he was being oisik in the Ksavim. And he said he went to the Ksavim, and he went to the attic, and he found it all there. And he came to America, and he made up his mind that he was going to print these Ksavim. And these are some of the Ksavim that he printed. This shtickle, Simin Yud Zayin, in Kocha Yecheskel, comes from this chibur, Sefsoisov, Doivavois, Bekever, Saisef Soisov, Shor Bicheskel, Halevni, Ben, Lagoyin Agodo, Rabbeinu Meir Yechil, Halevi, Zechetzadeh, V'Kodesh Lavracha, and Sef Soisov, shall this Yid, Chaim Yitzchak, Wolgalanter, Reb Chaim Yitzchak ben HaKodesh, Reb Yeshaya ben Reb Yechil, Yisomer, Zechron Lavracha, Hashem Yimkom Dam.